Day 2 of the Trump criminal trial is in the books. Let's talk about it. Okay, so a couple quick points about Day 2 of the Trump criminal trial. Number one, it is absolutely astonishing to me that they have already seated 7 jurors. Okay, you need a jury of 12 plus some number of alternates, probably 6, but we don't know for sure. So we're looking at 12 to 18 jurors. They already have 7 selected. That is really surprising. Most legal observers, including myself, expected this to take at least a couple of weeks, potentially longer. Jury selection can be a very long process, and you know, it should be. And I'm going to be honest with you, the fact that they've already seated 7 jurors makes me a little concerned. Okay, I have spent all day on jury selection for low-level cases that, you know, for criminal defendants that nobody's ever heard about. I mean, jury selection takes a while if you're doing it right. It's not just asking questions that have already been pre-formulated. You've heard some of these questions being reported in the news. A list of like 40 some odd questions that every juror was going to be asked, or each panel of jurors was going to be asked, or prospective jurors. But then the lawyers and the judge get to ask specific questions to specific prospective jurors based on the responses they give to the first set of questions and responses, things that they say on their own, or things that appeared in their, the jury questionnaire that they fill out prior to their arrival. So there's oftentimes lots of questions posed to individual jurors, and based upon what they say, that leads to more questions. So this can be a very, very long process. The fact that they've already selected 7 jurors, on the one hand, that sounds good, right? Well, they already got 7, and it's being reported that opening statements in this trial could begin as early as Monday. These 7 prospective jurors were told by Judge Merchan to report back on Monday, presumably for the start of the trial. Now, on the one hand, that's good because we want to see this, justice get underway here for Donald Trump. This has been put off for far too long. However, getting the jury right is very, very important for both sides. And really, more importantly, for the prosecution. And why do I say that? Because the prosecution only gets one bite at the apple. Say the judge commits a whole bunch of errors in the trial, including during jury selection, and the defendant is acquitted. There's not a damn thing the state can do about it. The state can't appeal and get a new trial. It doesn't matter how wrong the judge might have been during the course of the trial, erring, making rulings that are wrong legally that hurt the prosecution. Prosecution can't do a damn thing about it. Once the defendant is acquitted, that's it. Double jeopardy. You cannot get a new trial. That's not so for the defendant. If there are errors made during the trial, the defendant can appeal. The defendant can get a new trial if the errors were severe enough. The prosecution gets no such second bite at the apple. So, it's really important that both sides get a fair and impartial jury. But like I said, if there were problems in the jury selection process and the defendant is convicted, he can raise those issues on appeal. The prosecution cannot raise those issues. So they're screwed. But it's really important to get fair trial for both sides from the beginning. And that should be the focus. There shouldn't be, the prosecution should not be damaged by a poor jury selection process. And the defendant should not be erroneously convicted and then have to go through the appeals process because of an erroneous or, an error-filled jury selection process. And the rapidity with which they are selecting this jury gives me reason for concern. What it tells me could be happening. And there are things that were reported, on day 2, it is now day 3. I'm recording this the day after, but there were things that were reported yesterday about this jury selection process and the things that this judge said, which lead me to believe that he might not be allowing the lawyers to question some of these prospective jurors as fully as he should be letting them. If a juror says something that's concerning, that calls into question that juror's objectivity and lack of bias, the lawyers on both sides are entitled to explore that by asking questions of that juror. And it seems like the judge may have been cutting some of those questioning sessions of individual prospective jurors short, saying, we got to move this along, or something to that effect. Look, you got to get this right. Moving it along, that's not a legal basis. I mean, just because you want to move it along, that's not a legal basis for denying lawyers the full chance to explore these possible issues of bias and prejudice with these jurors. If it takes all freaking day, then it needs to take all freaking day. But the lawyers on both sides should have ample opportunity to ask questions to elicit whether or not these people can be fair and impartial. And if you're cutting these lawyers off, if you're not giving them enough time with individual jurors to question them fully, that could be a problem. It could be a problem for either side. I mean, because it could be a juror that's biased in favor of the defendant or in favor of the prosecution. So it doesn't really matter. That should not happen. That bias and that prejudice of a prospective juror should be fully flushed out. Doesn't matter how long it takes. So that really concerns me. Now, the plus side for the defendant, if there were those problems, that could be the basis of an appeal if Donald Trump is convicted. If this was, error, if we got a prejudicial witness on the jury that's prejudiced in favor of Donald Trump and results in an acquittal because of it, there's not a damn thing the prosecutor can do. This, I'll just say that this is making me concerned. I haven't seen anything reported that is clear error, or that that tells me a biased juror has gotten on this jury. Nothing like that. It's just making me a little concerned that it's going this quickly, because this is much more quickly than I and pretty much every other legal observer with experience in this. And that's the important part. There's a lot of people out there, including lawyers, who are opining on this trial. If the lawyer is not a criminal trial lawyer, then take whatever they say with a huge grain of salt. All right? I am a criminal trial lawyer. I've done a lot of this, so I know what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of people who are commenting who never tried a criminal case in their entire life. Okay? So whatever they have to say about it doesn't carry too much weight with me, and it shouldn't with you either. But I know the tendency in situations like this is to pick and choose who you listen to, right? And what people tend to do is they listen to the people who are telling them what they want to hear. You see this on both sides, but you see it in spades on the right. I mean, that's the whole Fox News operation, for example. But that's what they do. If there's, some douchebag, Trump cult lawyer on Fox News telling them what they want to hear, then they believe that lawyer is the greatest lawyer in the world. And so anyone who says anything contrary to what that person is saying doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're a hack. Anyway, just be careful about who you get your, whose opinion, whose legal analysis you actually trust. But I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, that is a cause for concern, and just wanted to bring that to your attention. One other thing I'd like to say here. I hear a lot of these Trump cultists whine about this idea that Donald Trump can't get a fair trial in New York. Hope that didn't break. Anyway, I reject that. Donald Trump can get a fair trial in New York. If Donald Trump was being tried in Oklahoma, yes, he'd have a more favorable jury pool. But he'd get a fair trial there. He'd get a fair trial here. The prosecution would get a fair trial here in New York. They'd get a fair trial in Oklahoma, assuming you didn't have a biased judge. And that's really the most important thing. It's not the prospective jury pool that could be the problem. It's the judge overseeing the jury selection process. Okay? Because people who are biased one way or another should not be getting on the jury. And you can find objective, non-biased people anywhere you go. It's going to be more difficult for one side or the other, depending upon where you are, if it's a politically charged case like this. And that just means the jury selection process is going to take longer. You're going to strike a lot more prospective jurors because they're coming in with bias. But you can get a fair and impartial jury anywhere. And I hear this on the flip side when people talk about if the case in Mar-a-Lago ever gets to court, people are concerned, oh, Donald Trump will never be convicted because it's in Florida. I reject that also. You can get a fair and impartial jury in Mar-a-Lago, or not in Mar-a-Lago, in Florida for the Mar-a-Lago case. You get a fair and impartial jury in New York. As long as you have a good judge overseeing a good process, you can pick a fair and impartial jury. Is that a guarantee? No, it's not a guarantee. There is a possibility that somebody lies their way onto the jury, but it's not nearly as easy to do as you might think. Anyway, so I hear these Trump cultists whining that Donald Trump can't get a fair trial in New York. So one, I would say to you what I just said. Yes, you can. But number two, I would say this. If Donald Trump thinks that he can't get a fair trial in New York, then maybe he shouldn't have committed these crimes in New York. You know, you get put on trial in the jurisdiction in which you committed your crimes. So maybe it wasn't so smart to commit these crimes in an area where you don't think you can get a fair trial. You know, Donald Trump, I know he was given this business empire. He didn't build it. He was given to it by his father. But if he was intending on committing lots of crimes in his business and in his run for president, you know, maybe he should have set up his base of operations elsewhere. Someplace where he, you know, because he obviously committing crimes is just part of who he is. So perhaps he should have put himself in a place that might have a more favorable jury pool as far as he's concerned, so that when he is eventually indicted and put on trial, he might have a better jury pool from his perspective. Just a thought. You know, you can't really whine about the prospective jury pool if you're the one who decided to commit the crimes there. At least that's my opinion. Anyway, that's it for now. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Be well, and I'll talk to you again soon.